Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Alder Hour, your favorite way to end the workday. We are at episode 10. Yes, episode 10. We have hit double figures. Fantastic stuff. Thank you for everyone who has been listening, tuning in, and joining in and appearing on the show. I'm Matt Alder. I host the Recruiting Future podcast, and I also host the Alder Hour. The Alder Hour is part of the Purple Acorn Network. And you can head over to purpleacornnetwork.com after the show if you want to learn more about Purple Acorn. You can follow us on LinkedIn. This episode will also be available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Now, this is an interactive show. So if you're watching this live, be sure to comment, and your comment will ping across our screen, and we'll try and read it out and involve you in the conversation. And we've got some really, really interesting topics coming up on today's show. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my two amazing co-hosts to the show. Hey, John, welcome back. Good to see
Thank you.
How have
Glad
you?
to be back.
Good to have you. How have you been?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm enjoying the winter in Florida, and it's 80 degrees. It's been
Oh,
terrible here, so it's
I'm jealous. It's been snowing outside today, but horrible snow where it's too warm to settle, but it still gets in your face. It's not the best.
yeah.
Rhona, how are you? How's the weather where you are? See, I'm English. We talk about the weather. It's what we do.
I'm doing good, and our weather is not as good as John's. It's like 20 something degrees, and it's supposed to snow again. And it's like,
Oh my
this
gosh,
is not what we do here in Tulsa. We're over it already.
Yeah,
it's true.
I was in Norway yesterday, and it was minus 14 degrees centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it was pretty cold.
Yeah.
Anyway, to the show, John, what do you have for us? What do you have coming up for us a bit later?
We are going to talk about a perspective on neurodiversity and exposing it in the workplace. Is it a wise thing to do or not?
Interesting topic indeed. And Rhona, what about your segment?
We're talking about one of my favorite things, which are hush trips.
Fantastic. Now, I didn't even know what a hush trip was until earlier today. And I'm really looking forward to talking about this one because I suspect everyone has been on one at some point. We'll find out more a little bit later. Before we do, let's get started with points and pints. Right. So my beer this week is one I had a couple of weeks ago. They came in packs of 4, so I wanted to make sure I finished them. But it was my favorite. Hi there to Evan, who's watching us on a plane, and he did indeed send me this clock. It looks like the world's smallest clock, just in the background, my Purple Acorn clock. It is bigger than it looks. There's perspective going on here. It's quite a long way back, that wall. But I will put it up in a more prominent place. But anyway, let's get this beer open. It's not going to fizz up, which is great. Rhona, do you have a drink that you're sharing with us tonight?
Yes, I have another one of the free AFs. I have the Cuba Libre this time, and we'll see. It's supposed to taste exactly like alcohol.
Wow.
Without the alcohol.
I want to hear all about that. John, do you have anything to share?
I'm boring compared to you two. I'm really just doing the zero sugar vitamin water. That's kind of how I live now, being a man of a certain age. So
is that kind of very HR of you? Not very,
very HR.
Not even pretend alcohol is allowed. Hi there to David watching in Kentucky, who just said hello, and Nicole in Ohio. If I can actually speak, this is alcohol free apparently. Great that people are listening in. Right, so on to points and pints, where we look at a couple of headlines that we've spotted in the news this week. Now, this first one. You may remember, if you were watching the show a few weeks ago, a couple of times we talked about Klarna, the European fintech company, because the CEO was making big statements about replacing his entire customer service team with AI bots, getting rid of his HR system and building one with AI, and all kinds of stopping hiring altogether, shrinking the size of the organization through AI. Now, lots of people, including me, got very excited about this in terms of perhaps paving a way of what the future looked like for HR, talent acquisition, all those kind of things. Anyway, it turns out, after a little bit of digging from the New York Times and other publications, things were not quite as they were made out to be. So it looks like the customer service team was actually outsourced to another company rather than taken over to AI. And the CEO has kind of been backpedaling a bit from a lot of this. He put a tweet out during the week talking about how humans were incredibly important to Klarna and they had human customer service people. And it just feels like that maybe he got caught in a bit of a backlash. The New York Times' view is that this was actually all about getting Klarna ready for an IPO. And painting a picture of this kind of AI-powered company to do that, which I remember we actually said at the time that there was a big caveat around that. So it's interesting. There's been quite a lot of discussion on LinkedIn about this, as the people who are saying that HR and talent acquisition are going to go to AI are talking nonsense because this man's the CEO's making stuff up. It's all overhyped. It's all this kind of stuff. Now, obviously, this is overhyped in this case, but the direction of travel, I believe, is very much the same. So I mentioned that I was in Norway last week, over the weekend, and I went to the Norway Ski Jump Museum, which is actually a place. But they had a super interesting graphic about climate change and the difference between climate and weather. So the graphic was of a man walking a dog. And the man's walking a dog in a straight line. So it's kind of almost like this is the climate line that's going up. But the dog is off the lead and it's going like this. It's going up, peaks and troughs and all that kind of stuff. And that's the weather. So the point they were trying to get across was the climate is warming, even if it's cold on a particular day, because the direction of travel is like that. So I think with this whole AI automation aspect to things, the direction of travel is really clear. And we're going to get hype like this. We're going to get disappointment. We're going to get all kinds of peaks and troughs. We had it with the internet. We had it with social media. We had it with mobile. We were told the internet was never going to catch on. Social media was just a fad. And my favorite of all was the time that people told me that no one would ever apply for a job on their phone. So this is just the way these things work. And I think if you want to see the real direction of travel, there was another CEO in the news in the last couple of weeks, which is the CEO of Chipotle, who was talking about, he was on CNN, I think it was, talking about the value that automating AI automation, the Paradox had done to their recruitment process, had brought to the company in terms of faster hiring, improving their bottom line, all of that kind of stuff. So direction of travel, that's where it's going. We're going to get this kind of hype and these kind of troughs as we go through. But I fundamentally believe that this is where we're still going. Rhona, what do you think?
I mean, I agree. It's where we're going. And I can think back to so many periods in my life, just like you said. It's happened with computers. It's happened with the internet. It's happened with everything. And everyone's like, no, this isn't going to happen. We can't resist it. It is going to happen. Now, is AI going to replace every recruiter, every HR person? Absolutely not. No, humans are still going to be needed. But yeah, things are going to change. How we work is going to change. It's just inevitable.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing as well. I think there seem to be, particularly on something like LinkedIn, where everyone is chasing attention and clicks and arguments and all that sort of stuff. There's these two very polarized views. One is there'll be no recruiters left by June, which people have been saying since last June. And the other one is nothing's going to change because I used ChatGPT once and it was rubbish. And I think that, most people will kind of pick a line in the middle of that. My concern, though, is if people go for the middle, things are going to get better. AI is just going to help us. I think it might be more towards the more towards there are no recruiters end of things. I think people need to be prepared and think about the skills they have and all that sort of stuff. John, what do you think?
I think that there's going to be stages of this, and there's going to be components of AI that are going to sort of meet us at a particular plateau, and then maybe a person will still have to be involved. So, do I think all recruiters are going to go away? No. Do I think that there's a layer, for instance, of recruiting that'll be handled by AI and sort of permanently move in that direction? I can see that. And then a recruiter sort of jumps in at a particular level of the process, a stage of the process. So will the number of recruiters necessary in that sort of context diminish? Probably. I mean, truth be told, there are certain industries through the decades we've seen really thin out in terms of how many personnel are needed. I can recall many moons ago working in distribution, and an automated claw machine was actually handling some of the sorting with scanned barcodes that were on these packages. And the union in America was very upset that we would need less workers to actually physically sort through product when the claw could do it much more efficiently, right, with computers. And the truth is that is what happened. The distribution center needed less workers, but not no workers, right? We still needed people at particular points.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily a student of the industrial history of the UK, but I do remember, back in the 80s that the Japanese car plants that built cars by robots, compared to the way that the British ones worked, kind of put those British companies out of business because they didn't adapt quick enough to the kind of the changing technology. I also think with this, it's very difficult to give kind of a blanket, a kind of a stereo, kind of a generalized view of exactly what's going to happen. I think that, we're seeing companies like McDonald's and Chipotle, who are having great success with conversational AI and automating their recruitment processes for those frontline jobs. But they're companies that have automation and speed in their DNA. They want to do everything quickly. They want to automate things quickly. So as organizations, they're going to be much more open to that. And obviously, other organizations in other industries are going to be different. So yes, it's going to be an interesting time. Awesome. Right. Let's move on to the next one. In times of change, hire for durable skills. So this is an article written by Caitlin McGregor, who's the CEO of Plum, and which is a assessment company. Check them out. Great business. And it's all about what I love about this. And I think this is kind of a really important aspect of this whole skills discussion that we're not necessarily having. This to me is the foundation of the move towards skills-based hiring and skills-based organizations. So the thinking with this is jobs are changing so quickly. The hard skills that people have, the technical skills, the specific on-the-job experience just kind of go out of date. So, we need to hire people based on their durable skills. So whether that's learning agility or teamwork or creativity or resilience or all of those things become incredibly important, because by the time you've hired someone to do a particular job, that job may have changed so much that the skills they have on their resume are just not worth, are just not going to work anymore. Are just not going to be relevant anymore even. And I think that not enough organizations have a systemized process for assessing these soft skills or durable skills, as they're called in this in this context, and that's kind of really important. And I think the benefits of doing it is, if you use the kind of assessments and science that's being talked about here, you can do that so much earlier in the process. So you can, literally put people through these tests, give them automated feedback, before you kind of drag them in for interviews, so people can, rule themselves in, rule themselves out. You get a really good sense of what's going on. And it's also a great way of understanding the future skills you need in your business by looking at the durable skills that you need, rather than trying to second guess what the technical skills of the future might be. So I think this is a big topic, and I don't think we talk about it in a scientific enough way. People kind of just throw out soft skills and try and judge them from an unstructured interview or someone's resume. But actually, we need proper science to be able to do this. Rhona, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with you on the fact that we're not really doing it in a scientific way. I mean, I've always been an advocate for really figuring out someone's ability to learn is really what I look for, at least when I'm hiring, and it's what I think everyone should look for because like you said, everything changes so quickly, and I mean, I'm from the tech industry. What I learned in college, the day I stepped out of college, whatever I had learned was already not a thing. So the university that I went to and what every professor was always like, I'm teaching you to know how to learn new things. And I think
Exactly.
that's what we should have always been doing. It goes back to education. It goes back to like even how we assess skills at work and like when we're interviewing people. The thing is, like you said, we have resumes, we have all of these things that really aren't a way to communicate that ability. So it's going to be a shift in like, how do we evaluate it as companies and as job seekers? How do you showcase your durable skills, your ability to learn and adapt? Because it's never going to be a resume. Like, I know I've been saying it, and people's like, the resume is never going to die. It is going to die.
Absolutely, because especially when you look at science like this, and especially with assessment companies making this science much more accessible and readily available at scale, I think that's a game changer. John, what are your views?
I don't know if the resume is going to die. I just put that out there. If it does, I think I'll be long gone. But I love Caitlin using this durable skills titling for it because I do think that that's really the perspective that we need to lean into a bit more. One of the things that she talks about in this article is really about this, Matt, like you were saying, this assessment perspective, but not just assessing how are you able to do X, but what drives you to do X? What keeps you from doing X? Because those things are going to be important to know. I often use the example of I can assess a chef's ability to prepare a wonderful meal. I can assess that through a preview, invite that person in to come into the kitchen at a restaurant and prepare a meal for us to sample as a panel. And so, yes, this is in keeping with the kind of cuisine that we would serve here. What I need to understand is does that person handle the skill set that they have when it's Friday night, we're on an hour and a half wait, and we're trying to put out beautiful food in an expedient way. That's a little different. And so being able to lean into how do you handle the pressure? How do you handle time management? How do you handle X, Y, and Z, right? Those things I think are crucial, right, in terms of being able to see what it is that makes up the person. The other thing that I'll mention is we don't do a great job of helping hiring managers know what durable skills will matter for the work, right? Like we promote someone to a manager or supervisor type position and say, you've got 2 roles to fill. Here's your interviews that we've put on your calendar. We don't really help them to know what it is. We barely give them job descriptions that are correct, let alone tell them how to interview effectively. So we probably need to do some more assessment with those that sit in managerial type role, hiring manager type positions to help them know how to ask good, durable skill questions.
Exactly. I think there's a whole kind of setup and reinvention that comes with this, definitely. Well, quite the situation today. So let's move on to the situation room. John, you have the floor.
I just love the title of this thread in Reddit. Should I come out as autistic at my workplace? I love it for a couple of reasons. One, this idea of coming out, right, we've known for decades, has been really kind of primarily focused on one type of revelation. But quite frankly, in the workplace, we have all kinds of people who are masking or cloaking something that may be very true for them, for fear of reprisal, for fear of being treated differently, and then they'd be comfortable with. And that is both on the positive and the negative. This isn't purely about negative discrimination. I think sometimes we don't want to be treated with kid gloves. We don't want to be coddled because of something that we may share. And so this particular thread, the person who's sharing this is saying, look, I'm recently diagnosed as neurodivergent. And I'm thinking about whether I should let my workplace know of this recent revelation. And it's a fascinating, I mean, the comments here are fascinating. You can read numbers, right? Aren't they?
Yeah.
And there's so many here that are saying, I hate to say this, but don't tell anyone. Keep it to yourself. I know idealistically we want to believe that our workplaces have grown and have become more mature and could operate bias free with this. I don't believe it, right? That's what so many people shared here. And it is a little disheartening to think that someone should have to worry about being authentic in the workplace, as if being neurodivergent necessarily means they can no longer do the work that they've been doing. That isn't what it necessarily means, right? It's the approach to it here.
Yeah.
And neurodivergence, there's so much more to it than sort of just one piece of a pie, one slice of a pie to say this is how everything fits once you're labeled as neurodivergent, right? I mean, I think we probably both have worked with people who have been on the neurodivergent spectrum, right? And saw the way that they were able to contribute.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me because I have ADHD, so I'm neurodivergent. I've only had diagnosis for a couple of years, so it's kind of quite a new thing that I'm still getting used to. And I think it is really disheartening on this thread because people talk about I told my boss I had autism and I got sacked as soon as I made a mistake.
Yes.
And just really horrible things. I think that there's a few things I'd say about it. I think that I would hope that we have much more education around neurodiversity. 20% of the world's population are neurodiverse or neurospicy in some kind of way. I really think it's important that people kind of understand that, because I think that there's a bit about, prejudice. So you've got ADHD, you're going to be late, you're not going to ever deliver anything on time, et cetera, et cetera. But also, I sometimes think that the narratives around it aren't very helpful. So there's a thing around ADHD about hyperfocus. So it's like, you have a superpower, you're ADHD, you have hyperfocus, you have all these kind of things. So I think also it can put unrealistic expectations down. So I'm employing someone with ADHD, they've got hyperfocus, they're going to be able to do 4 days work in 2 hours. And if you have ADHD, unfortunately, you don't get to choose what you hyperfocus on. So it could be, I'm hyper-focusing on exactly what the ingredients are in this alcohol-free beer for the next 4 hours, rather than doing the work that I'm supposed to do. So I think that's part of it as well.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, like that's I think that's where the education part comes in as well, to exactly your point, because if left to our own devices, we're assumptive too much about what a particular diagnosis means, what we've maybe experienced with one person who's neurodivergent in a particular way.
Exactly.
People will be biased and apply that to all kinds of people, right?
So I think that, I agree. And I think the big thing here is to see people as people, not as a label. And in terms of, do I think people should, come out about this at work? It's a difficult one because I'm in quite a privileged situation because I work for myself, so I'm not have to worry about getting fired by anyone, which is quite good. And to be honest with you, it's been a useful thing for me to talk about. One of the things I'm particularly bad at is making a good first impression. So, and I go to lots of conferences and lots of meetings and all those kind of things, and it's great to be able to kind of explain why that is, and it's not that I'm not someone worth talking to. But again, I get with an employer who's not kind of educated or understanding, it could be an issue. So
Yeah, it could be. And by the way, you made a wonderful first impression to me many moons ago, so I thank you for that. Don't
I was
think it's
probably
all
drunk.
I think that the trick here is, though, as I read, both of us read through so many sort of disheartening responses to this, the reality is we do need to continue to be advocates for people to be able to be authentic and to really sit in who they are. And there's so much energy wasted on masking what it is that you're dealing with and how it is you're dealing with it, that it really actually affects productivity and performance for that employee. So if we're really trying to be advocates as well for the health of the business, both of those worlds have to come together. And we really do need to help educate and advise and encourage along the way.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the big part of it. And I think that neurodiverse people have a huge amount to contribute to the workplace, and they do have some special powers if they kind of if they're there on the right day at the right time. So yeah, I mean it's a really important topic, and it's it's great to get the opportunity to talk about it. John, thank you very much. We are going to move on to our guest. Hi, Lilith. Very nice to meet you, and welcome to the Alder Hour.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
Fantastic. So could you start off by just introducing yourself and telling everyone what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lilith Christiansen. I am the founder and chief consultant at Humangenuity. We are a human capital consultancy that was founded on the principle of the core to business success really lies with the organization's people. And if you think about having even the best strategies in the world, that's only going to get you so far if you don't have the right people with the right skills in the right role to get the job done. And you'll never achieve your highest levels of business performance if you don't have that. So we partner with organizations that share that philosophy and help them accelerate their employee program design, looking at how we can reduce regrettable attrition and raise overall levels of performance.
And employee experience is central to this, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think it starts with culture as being a feeder and an influencer into what that employee experience is going to be, and then designing the appropriate kind of programs and interventions that allow employees to thrive, and that's what allows them to do a better job with customers and do better for the business.
Now, employee experience is a huge topic. Where's the best place to start? Where's the best place to start thinking about this?
Yeah, well, I think it has to begin with defining the culture and the values of the organization, because any employee program is going to get designed off of that. Then I recommend really thinking about the employee experience at the very beginning. So the beginning of that employment journey with new hire onboarding.
Yeah, I think that's so important as well, because even companies that have a really great candidate experience, that can just fall off a cliff sometimes when it moves into onboarding. And I know that onboarding can very much be seen as a process rather than an experience. How should people be? And I know you wrote a book about onboarding a few years ago as well. How should people think about onboarding?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. The way they should think about it, as you said, it's so much more than just a process, than the administration or the provisioning. It's really the entirety of that experience and thinking around how to design a program that helps that new hire understand the culture so they can thrive in it, how they understand the business strategy so that they can really connect their day-to-day to the overall success of the organization. Be intentional around the relationship building with others within the organization, and focus in on that career support. That's something that a lot of times is maybe held off until later when someone is growing their career in the organization. But if you really think about it up front, how they define their goals at the very beginning and the type of feedback that the manager is going to give them is really instrumental in helping them to get some early wins and really be able to succeed at the organization. And then the skills piece, of course, is that fifth element that's absolutely critical to kind of think about how does that get laid into the experience from the very beginning and all the way through the new hire's first year.
And I suppose that kind of ties in with what we were talking about earlier in the show when we were talking about skills going out date really quickly. And it's almost like recognizing that right from the start, that the person coming in, needs to develop skills and add value to the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that piece on durable skills really gets to that, because you may hire an individual because they are persistent and they have leadership skills and that desire to learn. And maybe you hired them in a customer service role to start, but the organization finds out they actually need more people that are client facing in an in-person relationship. So how do you help them learn those new skills of a new role so that they can stay relevant within the organization and grow and develop as an individual?
And what are some of the other key principles that people need to think about when it comes to onboarding?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I think is really important, in addition to focusing in on that employee experience, where I think is common for people to start, is to pay almost just as much attention to the manager. So this can go a long way, particularly if you're an organization that doesn't bring on hundreds of people in a short period of time, that it's a little more onesie-twosie. The help that the organization can give that manager goes a long way to helping that new hire experience. Just even providing a few discussion guides for them around how to talk about the culture with the new hire, how to set goals with the new hire, and how to give feedback on a regular basis throughout their first few months within the organization. I think a buddy program is another element that I've really seen grow in popularity from when we first published the book till now. I think it's almost becomes table stakes at organizations, and it can really help with forming a quick relationship, a positive relationship between a new hire and another employee, and it helps that new hire learn so much about the culture and the way things get done at an organization.
And I suppose it's interesting. This is top of my mind because I was having a conversation for the podcast earlier today with someone who specializes in network science. Mm-hmm. So that kind of understanding those kind of hidden pathways in an organization in terms of how you get stuff done, and who kind of holds influence and all that kind of stuff. Is that something you can kind of formalize in onboarding, or is it something you can just help people be quicker at learning?
Yeah, I definitely think it could be formalized. It's something that I call a stakeholder map. And this is another one of those good tools to give the manager to say, think about who are the folks that are influencers to the work that the new hire is going to do, who is going to be influenced by the work that they are doing, and who are some of those folks that are just good connectors in the organization, and those that really hold on to that institutional knowledge. That can be a really great person for them to know who to go to when they have a particular question.
And how much has, because work's obviously changed a lot in the sort of the last 5 years in particular, how much are you seeing onboarding change?
What I've seen change about it is less around the principles that makes onboarding successful and more around the mechanisms that are used to deliver onboarding. So certainly AI can come into play today, and that wasn't an option before. What I've seen some organizations successfully use AI for as it relates to onboarding is doing some matching of new hires and buddies. So kind of taking that job away maybe from the manager or from the HR department and allowing it to happen more quickly within the process. And then being able to accommodate the different work styles, right? We went from everyone almost working in person before the pandemic to switching the complete other way, and now we have a shift somewhere in between. So onboarding really needs to be accommodating to those different experiences and how the information is delivered.
And do you think companies have properly adapted to that? Because I know that, for example, I had some, a friend of mine who started his job just after the pandemic, and very skilled, experienced person. And his issue wasn't that he was working remotely. His issue wasn't that he wasn't seeing people face to face, but it was just that a lot of the things that you sort of pick up by asking a quick question to someone, what happens if I press this button, or what goes on here? He wasn't able to do, and he had to kind of organize Zoom calls to do that in a more formal way. Do you think companies have adapted to that in terms of getting people the right information at the right time?
Yeah, I think most organizations have done a much better job of it, that we've been living in this remote environment for many years now. I think at first, probably what your friend experienced was maybe they delivered something in person. Now they just turned that into a Zoom meeting, but they didn't replace it with any of those opportunities for networking and the connection to help him know who to meet or who to ask questions to. So I think the organizations that have done the best job today are really thinking about it as a distinctive remote experience and creating opportunities, even if they're lunch and learns, to have people come together once a week, all of the new hires, or put together a Slack channel that's just for the new hires. Those are some of the tactics that help kind of overcome that challenge of not being able to walk down the hall and ask someone a question.
And it's moving back to going back to the point about AI. I saw an organization last year who were using it to create a really kind of hyper personalized onboarding experience for people. So it was knowing what content to deliver, what they needed to do, the speed they moved through things. Do you think it has a role in in personalizing onboarding, in doing things that you can't do just with a human process?
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting application for AI, and have started to see some new companies with technology that's helping that to progress. That I do think it's a real opportunity, in particular for larger organizations around the globe, where the piece that needs to be customized could be the language that new hire needs to participate in the information in. It will become a much easier way to scale a program and have that customization that allows the new hire to really get the most out of it, because that's another key principle, is making sure it's not a one size fits all approach, but rather something that does get customized to role, position, level of experience, that type of thing.
A number of years ago, it might even be 10 or 15 years ago, I was working for a recruitment marketing agency. We were doing some stuff on onboarding, and we put this little book together, kind of white paper book, and it was called something like 20 Worst First Days. And it was stories that we crowdsourced from around, just the people around the building, about horror stories that they'd had on their first day. And traditionally, sort of people think of onboarding as being this thing that happens on this first day, but really smart companies are doing it kind of earlier and earlier in the process, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the ability, if an organization can take advantage of that time from offer acceptance up to day one, that can really accelerate that time to productivity for the new hire. Take care of the paperwork ahead of time, maybe set up some meet and greets before the new hire arrives. That starts to begin that information exchange. It also reaffirms for them kind of that desire to join the company, that they're wanted. It gets them a lot more excited. And, there are still situations where people accept a job and then they're the ones ghosting the company and never show up on day one, which is why it is really important to have some type of interactivity and discussion before, in that time period in between.
And a final question for you: when should onboarding stop?
That is a great question, Matt. For me and my experience and the work that I've done, I think for most organizations, the new hire onboarding should last through the end of the first year. So that gives an opportunity to really just go through a whole business cycle, right? If you can think about if you join in a very seasonal role or a business that has some seasonality to it and you miss the busy season, you're going to be 9 months in before you experience that pace for the first time. So it's important to think about it as a whole year. And that doesn't mean it has to be a consistent amount of information or training or anything like that for the full year. But you do want to consider that whole period and then celebrate that milestone. And I've seen even where companies are really going and leaning into this experience as they use onboarding to support individuals that are maybe just on leave and then they come back to the organization. Or you think about promotions, how they are applying these similar types of programs and principles at each of those milestones is something that really sets an organization apart in terms of their employee value proposition.
Lilith, thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having me, Matt. I enjoyed it.
Excellent. Let's move on to trending or ending. So, Rhona, I've been looking forward to talking about this all show. Tell us all about Hush Trips.
Yes, let's talk about Hush Trips. And basically, we love coming up with new terms for old things. A Hush Trip is basically just an employee secretly working from a getaway location without telling their employer. It's really what most people think of when they think of remote work, right? Everyone with the laptop at the beach, that's what everyone thinks of when they think of remote work. The truth is, most people have taken a Hush Trip. I know I have. I've taken quite a few. I've been working remotely since 2017. And I think my first Hush Trip was probably 2 years into it when I was very comfortable. Knew my schedule, knew everything, and knew I could juggle it. The thing is, I didn't feel the need to tell my company or my manager where I was at because my working hours didn't change. My plans were all for after work. So it was really none of their business what I was doing after work or where I was. What's the big deal for some people? Because I can definitely see everything from different sides, right?
Yeah.
It can impact productivity if someone isn't really used to it. I think if I would have taken my first Hush Trip, maybe my first month working remotely, it would have been a disaster and I probably would have gotten fired. Because you have to know how to balance it. You have to be like used to things. And then I think, as always, HR people, we're always going to think about setting a precedent and what it's going to mean, what other people see. Oh, Rhona's traveling the world while working. I'm here sitting at home. Can I do it? Can I not do it? Other people think just the fact that you're on vacation means you have to take PTO. 100% disagree with that because, again, if you're still working, if your hours aren't impacted, then what's the difference between working at my house where I usually work or working somewhere else? Now, the only time I've seen this be an issue is going back to that company I was working at in 2017. We mostly hired people that lived in Europe, and you know how easy it is to travel there. Well, there were quite a few people who were going to other countries where they didn't have a work permit, and
Right.
they were staying for way longer than what is considered a vacation.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Like if you go for a week or two somewhere to a different country where you don't have a work permit, most countries, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to stay somewhere for 6 months, 2, 3 months, and you're not paying taxes in that country and you don't have a work permit, that's where, as a company, you can get it's liability for you. And that's why, there's so many ways of tracking it. We used to get a report from IT of what IP address people were using or things like that. But I think it's really the culture that you create and let people know, look, as long as you can do your work, you can work from wherever. But for this amount of time. Like, have a clear policy. Anything over 2 weeks, you have to let us know. So what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I love this topic. First of all, I used to be the king of the hush trip, so and it was partly because of the job I had. I did a lot of external meetings and things like that. And I remember the ultimate one was my boss phoning me up because there was a crisis and he wanted me in the meeting room right now. And I was watching a cricket match 100 miles away, so that was quite an awkward conversation. But I was with a client, so it's slightly different. Yeah, I think that obviously times have changed a lot since then. I think it comes down to what is it that we want people to do? What are the outputs that we want people to have? And I think that so many companies are still not clear about that, which is why we're seeing all this back and forth about returning to the office and all this sort of the kind of management style where you have to watch people all the time, and productivity is measured in keystrokes or hours that you spend doing a job. And I think that we need to get to a point where we're judging people on what productivity that really matters. What outputs are they putting out? It doesn't matter how much time they spend doing it. It's like, are we getting the performance that we want from them? And I think then that kind of takes away the issue to a certain extent, because people can work from anywhere to do that, and we're sort of seeing that in a lot of organizations at the moment. I think you make a great point about tax and work permits and things like that. And I know that's been an issue for, quite a few companies, that they've had employees who are kind of sort of digital nomads, or who are being paid in a country that they're not living in, and there comes some quite severe sort of corporate governance and tax implications for that. And also, unfortunately, I also think it does add fuel to this return to the office movement. It's just like, people are just going on holiday and not doing any work and all that sort of stuff. So, fundamentally, I'm a big fan of hush trips, and I think they should just be called non-hush trips. And people should say, here I am, this is what I'm doing. I'm balancing my holiday with my job. So I'm working all day and then I'm doing this and I'm in this location, because, for people who can do that, they've got the tools to do it. They've got internet connectivity, all this kind of stuff. But I do think that companies need to really think about, what is it that this person does for my organization? What are we actually judging them on? What does doing a good job look like? And it's so disheartening that so many places haven't even got that basic thing sort of nailed down.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And I like that you brought up, I hadn't thought about it, but the OG hush trips were really when you would go on a business trip. I mean, come on, who hasn't stayed an extra day somewhere, or gone sightseeing because you're in a cool country, and you do a shorter like client meeting and then go to lunch and go somewhere else, go sightseeing? That's the hush trip per se. Why no? If no one cared at that point, that is 100% acceptable, because I've done those trips with my actual manager going with me on sightseeing things in the middle of the workday. Just right after lunch, let's go here for a while. So if that wasn't a problem back then,
Yeah.
why is it when a remote worker does it? Again, it goes back to trust and really the culture that you're trying to build at your company. I think people have to understand that one of the main draws of remote work for a lot of people is the flexibility. So if you're going to be promoting, we have flexibility, we have remote work, we have things like this, you shouldn't be worried about things like hush trips. It shouldn't be a thing. You shouldn't have to hush about it, because as long as you're getting your work done, who cares where you do it?
Exactly. So I think that we should call this as a definite trend,
Yes.
and a lot easier to do than it used to be, perhaps. Rhona, thank you very much for bringing that one to us.
Right. See you next week.
See you next week. Okay, that is us done for the 10th episode of the Alder Hour. Lots of great stuff coming up on the Purple Acorn Network. So tomorrow, the wonderful HR Morning Show, which is every Tuesday, 7 a.m. Pacific Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Wednesdays, Hire Her, a Talent Collective podcast. That's at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. My First Job with Mike Wood is on Thursdays at 11 a.m. or 2 p.m., depending where you live. From the Desk with Jada Montemorano is on Fridays at 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. We will be back on the Alder Hour next Monday. You can listen to this episode as a podcast. If you want to hear some of my longer form interviews, you can listen to Recruiting Future podcast. Either way, it's been great having you. Thanks for everyone who has joined in with the conversation, telling us where you're all watching it and what the weather was like where you are. We will see you next Monday. This is Matt Alder, clocking out.